Walter stepped out of his cabin. The twilight sky draped in a quilt of storm clouds that loomed low, as if pressed down by an unseen weight. The forest surrounding him stood in an unsettling quiet, a silence that gnawed at his nerves, like unseen fingers raking at the edges of his consciousness. Something felt profoundly amiss. The atmosphere crackled with an unearthly tension, heralding the first hints of impending dread. Days spent alone in this desolate retreat had frayed his mind, thoughts unraveling in a manner that left him disquieted. It all began with whispers, a rustle he initially attributed to the trees. Yet, as he listened more intently, it morphed into a rhythm, an insistent cadence that echoed in time with the dark thoughts swirling in his mind. He tried to dismiss it, convincing himself that the wind was merely playing tricks. But each night, the sound persisted. An off-tempo lullaby that lulled him into an uneasy sleep, filled with muted terrors. Then there were the shadows, creeping forms that darted beyond the periphery of his vision, conjuring figures that swelled and danced before him with every flicker of his imagination. Every time he turned to confront them, he was met only by the echo of his own breaths and the pounding of his heart, like a war drum caught in a tempest. The sensation of being watched grew increasingly insistent, as though an invisible observer lurked at the edges of his reality. One restless evening, during a troubling scratch at the cabin's door, Walter caught sight of them, fleeting glimpses of forms flitting through the trees, shimmering like static before dissolving into the enveloping forest. He brushed it off, attributing the vision to fatigue that loomed like a mountain. Yet waves of paranoia crashed over him, leaving him stranded in a sea of doubt. What if the things he saw were real? What if he had ventured too far into isolation, too far from the grasp of sanity? Inside, the suffocating darkness of the cabin felt like a tomb, while the wind howled with plaintive shrieks that twisted the familiar sounds of the woods into a sickly symphony. Suddenly, the whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of voices, thrumming through the very fabric of his reality, urging him to listen, to understand. They spun tales of a world unfathomable, where geometry twisted like a deranged carnival ride, and time folded in on itself like an origami nightmare. Unable to escape the grasp of his mind's synaptic misfires, Walter found himself irresistibly drawn towards them. Days melted into a haze of restless nights and sunless days. His perception warped, reality itself twisting into impossible angles. Was the cabin even his? The walls began to pulse rhythmically, while corners stretched farther than they should. Objects danced under his gaze, and behind him, echoes of laughter entwined with the whispers revealing a childlike delight that sent icy shivers racing down his spine. In those fleeting moments, the specter of clarity flickered like a candle flame, leaving just enough tether to reality for him to feel a profound dread about where this path might lead. One fateful night, the air crackled with sharp electricity, melding with whispers so emphatic they transformed into a roar. Compelled, Walter stepped outside once more, the ground beneath him trembling slightly as if it breathed. A swirling mist curled around his ankles, a phantasmal welcome into something truly otherworldly. The whispers coalesced into a voice that resonated from the depths of his inner turmoil, beckoning him deeper into the woods. As he plunged into the heart of the forest, the whirling mists solidified. A gaunt specter, cloaked in an ever-shifting robe of darkness, stood before him, its features indiscernible, yet somehow both familiar and grotesque. Reality twisted, warping around him as the creature, embodying a knowledge so profound it ensnared Walter in a shroud of recognition, like deja vu washing over a forgotten memory. "Your world is but a dream," it murmured, its voice a blend of sonorous echoes laced with mocking laughter. "You forget, little one, it is we who are awake." The realization that dawned upon Walter felt like ice coursing through his veins. At that moment, he comprehended the whispers, the shadows, and the crumbling convergence of his sanity. It had all culminated in this confrontation. The timeless horror unveiled before him weighed heavily on his mind, unraveling the very fabric of his being. Expanding realities coiled around him, tendrils of cosmic understanding, refracting through impossible dimensions, while any hope of return disintegrated like mist under the sun. The entity grinned, revealing spaces where a mouth might exist, a wretched, relentless scrape of understanding, too terrible to contain. Then it surged into existence. The boundaries between Walter's mind and this alien presence collapsed. His screams filled the forest, spiraling through the trees like wind, yet they fell silent against the uncaring vastness. The cabin, the shadows, the whispers, they became nothing but echoes of shattered insanity, leaving behind an unsettling chill, a haunting emptiness where once he stood.